Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Season 1, Episode 4 of Gotham Knights. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, let's start off with the Harvey Dent situation of the episode. Obviously, we find out that, yes, everything's kind of it seemed like it might just go to Harvey. Well, I mean, obviously he still has to do the campaigning and everything with Mary Hill's death, but it turns out Lincoln March has stepped up into the fray, and it's like, and calls him like, hey, you don't want another two-faced politician. I was like, I got that. And obviously it seems like they're leaning into that even more so, because I even love the fact that just the symbology of him waking up and like half his face, like obviously it's like you see like half his face as he's like laying down and he's kind of waking up, and then it's like, oh, like you were partying last night. I was like, oh, that's interesting. And he's like, oh, I have this key, don't know where I got it from. I was like, wait, they're not. So Harvey's side of the episodes make it heavily implied he's losing time, and I'm like, so maybe they're going to really lean into like, well, I mean, I don't know if it's always been diagnosed as that, but you'd assume the Two-Face thing has always been like a manifestation of a dissociative personality disorder. But it seems like maybe Harvey already, like maybe that'd be something we'll lean into, like the more mental health side of things, of like maybe he's always had that, and it just obviously like maybe getting his face burned triggered it, and maybe in this case it's already kind of starting to rear its ugly head type of situation, because there's a lot of interesting things. Like, well, first and foremost, he has his key, he doesn't remember what he was up to beforehand, he goes to check out the coin that was found on Bruce's body, but it's like, no, you already checked it out yesterday or last night. It's like, what? It's like, I don't remember that. And at first I was like, what's going on? I was like, why would you take that coin out? Because we know Lincoln March is like, oh yeah, I got sent a coin. I'm like, could Harvey have sent that? But I'm like, no, I was like, oh, I'm so stupid. I was like, what it is Harvey's the one that killed Mary Hill. We find that out later on because he unlocks the car, because the key he found on himself is the key to the limousine. He's the one that killed Hill, and he had brought it up to, I don't know if it's his boss or whatever, he had brought it up to someone else about, I think she might just be the head detective or something like that, the person that, the detective that Harvey's working with. He had presented her with the coin and the story about the Court of Owls and stuff like that. And it's like, yeah, the same one was found on Bruce Wayne, because it is the same coin. Harvey, in his trance or whatever, his Two-Face trance of some sort, he went and grabbed the coin and put it on Mary Hill's body and killed him to make it look like the Court of Owls there. Because once again, I was thinking like, could the Court of Owls have gotten to him? Because like, could he actually be part of the Court of Owls? But I'm like, no, it's just that Mary Hill talked all that crap. He's also like your main competition. So, I mean, Two-Face kind of represents kind of like that darker nature in you, that darker side of kind of getting whatever you want. It's also very, it all kind of comes together with the fact is this all circulates around these Court of Owl coins, which we know Two-Face's thing is flipping the coin and everything. So I was like, oh, very poetic in that regard. But I mean, at the very least, Harvey knows he had something to do with the mayor's death because he has the key on it. But I don't know if he's gonna like he knows, and obviously he's not telling anyone about it. But whether Harvey's fully pieced it together this episode, or whether he fully pieces it together, like obviously the breadcrumbs are there, but I'm like, interesting. And now part of me wonders, like, could he be the one? I was like, well, I was about to say no, because like Lincoln got one himself. Lincoln March got a coin, so is like, are the Court of Owls targeting him, or is that him being making a huge bluff to be like, oh my God, I'm in danger of these Court of Owls, because he knows that Harvey's investigating the Court of Owls, so. Because once again, I'm pretty sure Harvey made that move of killing Hill. I'm not, unless that's the big red red herring rather, that make you think it's Harvey, but it actually was the court. It wasn't the mutant gang. It wasn't the Court of Owls. It was Harvey, but he's framing them, or maybe it's like it's a bluff, and he's thinking he's losing his mind, and it's the Court of Owls screwing with him in some regards. That could also be a possibility, but I don't know, man. I feel like that side of Harvey's already come out. Because what was I also thinking about, because Harvey kind of goes psychotic. Obviously, there's only so many like pathways you can really take it. Like obviously Telltale's like gives you the choice of you can go this, you can go left, you can go right, but you know, the conversation becomes like the illusion of choice, yada yada, so on and so forth. So there's still a limitation of how many variations of how events can play out. But either way, once again, you could be like full blown traditional Two-Face, half the face is burned, Harvey did, or you could go through the story having Harvey never having his face burned, but he still goes psychotic. Because once again, it's there. The burnt face is just a physical manifestation. The trauma of that triggered it, but if enough trauma's there to trigger it regardless, it's already, like, sadly in his DNA. It's probably, you know, might be a hereditary thing that's already there that just happens to get triggered by the trauma. So, but that's kind of an instance of, yeah, burn face or no burn face, he's still Two-Face without being Two-Face. One's psychological and physically he's Two-Face, while another one is just purely like the mental psychological angle to it. So that could be where they're going with, like, oh, might not have the burn face. Burn face comes later in the story to match the psychological and mental thing that he's going through right now. That's my immediate thought. So we'll have to wait to see where things kind of go on that front. Another interesting element to this episode is we actually had Cullen and Stephanie actually bond, because obviously Harper still got beef with her because of the last episode, but it turns out Harper's real beef with why she really doesn't like Stephanie, even though, you know, even Turner was like, yeah, you two actually have a lot in common. It's because of that. She has animosity towards Stephanie because Stephanie's a reminder of who she could have been. It's like, I'm just as smart as her. If I had the right opportunities, the right parent situation, went to the right school, I could easily be her. But I grew up in this situation. I did, you know, and it's like, you know, we live in a situation where we are judged from where we're from rather than who we are, you know, and it's like, that's what bothers her the most. But Cullen got to know Stephanie in this episode, and he's like, right, she's not the Miss Perfect that you think she is. Like, she has her own complications, but even says, don't judge her before really getting to know her, just like, you know, because you're just going to be repeating the cycle of how people treated us, judged us. So it's like, you're doing the same thing to Stephanie because you think she's Miss Perfect and everything. But we found out, because when she was when Cullen kind of opened up about, like, obviously, once again, like, his their abusive father, Stephanie was kind of like, she kind of references something that made you go like, wait, do you have some? Because, well, once again, her dad eventually becomes a villain called Cluemaster. So I was like, I'm still like, could there be something going on in the background? Because she referenced previously, like, oh, my mom's working late at night to help my dad. I was like, is that a cover story? Which it is, just not about the right parent. I thought it was a cover story for her mom covering something for her dad. In fact, it was a cover story for Stephanie about her mom, because it turns out her mom has a drug addiction. So, and she hasn't told anybody about it, not even Turner, despite how close they are, because I guess it's just a hard thing to talk about, which even Colin's like, I'm not going to judge you. I'm not going to talk to anyone about it. But if you need anyone to talk to about something like that, I'm here. You know, I'm not going anywhere. But that's interesting to know that her mom has, you know, some issues like that. I'm like, which is kind of like, man, you're like hitting her with the twofold, because it's like, right, she's got mom issues, but it's like, I guess it's once again, not unless there's a continuity where he doesn't become the villain Cluemaster, but it's still a thing of, that's a possibility. She might get hit with the twofold. But I mean, once again, those circumstances, like overcoming that, maybe, you know, maybe her mom will be able to kind of remedy things, you know, get professional help. You know, obviously an addiction is a lifelong thing. It doesn't go away, even with, you know, you getting sober and everything. It's every day it's a battle, every day it's a struggle. So maybe like her mom getting better and her dad turning villain will eventually, obviously, like expedite her position into heroism, even though she's kind of there helping out Turner and the crew. So I don't know. That was just such an interesting thing, because I keep expecting stuff about her dad, and for it to be stuff about her mom was really kind of an interesting development. So. But obviously, we're continuing our investigation into Alan Wayne. I think last episode I might have said Albert Wayne. I don't remember. I don't know if I said Alan Wayne or not. But Bruce is like, what was it? Great-great-great-great-grandfather or something like that, like from 100 years ago. Well, no matter what Turner's looked into, nothing proves that Alan was murdered. It does seem like fell down like a sewer drain and ended up drowning or dying or whatever. But he does have these very specific wounds, and obviously I knew it correlate with the opening of the episode where that guy was kind of acting crazy. He had all those wounds. I was like, are we dealing with like I mean, when you think of someone kind of having like being crazy and kind of seeing stuff that's not, they're hallucinating and like kind of being like driven crazy by fear, you're like, I mean, my immediate mind goes to Scarecrow. So I was like, could the Court of Owls have access to Scarecrow's toxins, or do they just have their own thing? Once again, we don't know the full depths of the rogues gallery that exists in its continuity. Well, because of Delia, we know the Joker exists. That's the only surefire antagonist we're aware of. Like, main rogues gallery person that we're aware of. I don't remember if there's been any other reference. There might have been, but I just can't think of. But either way, the guy sadly gets murdered at the beginning. Well, actually, he's driven crazy and he ends up, unaliving himself. Well, it turns out the knife that they got from the Talon is actually the same weapon, and it matches the wounds on Alan Wayne's body. So it's like, okay, so this is the weapon. And obviously they're thinking that the weapons must be dipped in some very specific toxin to drive the respective people crazy. Which is also interesting considering Cullen was literally using it as a means of cutting the cake earlier in the episode. Hopefully there was no residual, or maybe it's because of condensation and all that. Like maybe it's completely gotten absorbed or evaporated from the blade. Any traces of the toxin might have waned over the period of time that they've had the knife. Considering they've had it since episode. Yeah, they got it in episode 2, right? So you have the team then kind of split up. First and foremost, I love the fact this Cullen is still using that police disguise, and I love that this time he showed up with the coffee to help the guy out. He ended up running into Harvey, and Harvey obviously didn't recognize him. So I wonder, is he going to be able to do that? Is that going to happen more and more? Like, we're going to use him? I mean, is Cullen just going to straight up be the master of disguise of the team? Or is it just because of this very... your luck's going to run out. I mean, you broke in and broke out, once before you did it yet again. One was just kind of give them access to the GCPD's files and stuff. And they ended up finding about the guy that died at the beginning of the episode. Turns out he's one of Bruce's lawyers, one of his confidant lawyers. Well, Harper and Turner went to investigate and ended up finding that lawyer's house tossed, and his son there being like, no, my dad had kind of snapped, and he had written all over the walls about the owls being in the house. So it's right. So turns out Bruce showed up 2 days before he died and asked the lawyer to rewrite the will, and it wasn't like he wasn't going to take everything from because the whole thing is, if they can find this will, because it turns out the whole thing was supposed to be hey, Bruce hadn't changed his will, so he was not leaving anything to Turner, so that was Turner's motive for killing Bruce. But if you find out, if they're able to prove hey, he actually changed his will, that doesn't get rid of our motive. It's that gets rid of our motive. It's well, technically speaking, but technically not. Because truth be told is, they could still make the argument. I mean, at least it will poke a hole in their case to some extent, but they still can make the argument, well, yeah, but you killed Bruce because you didn't know that he had changed the will to include you. You were still under the impression that, that he was cutting you out. So that could still be the argument using that front, even if they have the will. But either way, I mean, there's also probably going to be a question of the authenticity, especially considering the lawyer's dead, and maybe that's also why they did it, because not only because Bruce was getting too close with the Court of Owls thing, they needed their fall guy, Turner, him and the rest of the crew to stick, so maybe they knew about this real will and testament situation, because the only one who has a copy of it is Bruce, and he hid it somewhere and no one knows where it is, so maybe that's why they came after his lawyer. But there was a conversation of, oh yeah, Bruce does this. It wasn't he'll become the most powerful person in Gotham or something like that. Once again, and plus the secrets that Stephanie's kind of hiding from Turner makes me believe this has to have something to do with Turner's upbringing, especially because the court went out of their way. I mean, they just find him fascinating, but there's got to be, Turner, there's got to be something about who his parents really are, what his blood relation is, that he's got to be someone pretty significant, that like there's so much mystery surrounding him, like obviously his parents' murder. I mean, you could easily just be like, you're kind of like, it's that thing of like, right, your parents aren't somebody special necessarily, but they're special to you, so they're not like a nobody. But, you know, because it's like, right, like Dick's parents weren't, you know, other than like circus performers, that's all they were, but they weren't like special people. I mean, you can make the argument the Waynes are just like, you know, they're a rich, powerful family, but they're like, you know, they're still regular people. But arguments like, well, the Waynes can never be a regular family with just their deep-seated roots in Gotham's history. But you get what I'm trying to say, though, because like you take something like Ryan Wilder from Batwoman, like her mom, like it's just like, well, that's actually kind of even better example. 'Cause I'm about to use her adopted mom as an example, but it's like, well, look at her biological mom. Her biological mom ended up being someone pretty interesting, you know. So it could just be the same thing with Turner, that his bio parents are maybe have some part to blame. Is because I was thinking, my theory beforehand was maybe Turner's like some court of owl royalty, but they don't say anything to him. They're just like, oh, you've proven to be more like cunning than we gave you credit for, so we want to welcome you amongst our ranks. But it's like, would you really go out of your, like, it feels like a very selective club, so would you really bring him amongst your ranks? I mean, it's like, well, it helps nip this whole situation in the bud and lessen the headache that it is, but I don't know. But other than that, you had Carrie and Delia going to visit, because the person they tied this all back to, the knives and everything, belonged to the Butcher of Gotham, which they were referencing like, oh yeah, used to, because it was like the early 1900s when this person was doing their serial killer thing, because they were like a circus performer, and then were also like a serial killer. They were talking about like, oh yeah, like by gaslight of Gotham. I was like, oh, that's interesting, just because, you know, just made me think of like Batman, was it in a movie called Gotham by Gaslight by Gotham by Gaslight? Is that it? I don't remember. It's something Batman with gaslight in the title. I can't remember the title off the top of my head, but it made me think of that. But the old lady, like, I kind of this feeling early on where it's like, oh, the fact is that Talon just happens to have the blades used by a serial killer from the early 1900s. I was like, is he going to be still alive? It turns out, yes, he is. We find out by the end of the episode he actually is. Especially because his daughter's like, oh, Dad still visits me. You're like, still? And they're like, yes. And I guess she's not all there mentally, because she's like, oh, Delia was able to trick me into revealing stuff I'm supposed to be keeping secret. Now it's like, right, the court of owls, owls are gonna come for you. So, I mean, jumping ahead a little bit, when Carrie showed up to help Turner, she used an explosive device to bring down the cave on top, and looked like he got crushed, and his body just snaps back into place at the very end of the episode. So it's like, this guy is 100 plus years old, potentially, if it's the same guy. Plus, he's semi-immortal, which immediately I was like, is this going to be some Lazarus Pit stuff? But then I try to think like, well, the Lazarus Pit gives you longevity, but it doesn't... It gives you longevity, but it doesn't... Well, because I'm trying to remember, it's like, that was the source of why Ra's al Ghul was able to, like, I guess you have to, like, bathe into it and really, like, maybe on multiple times. I can't remember off the top of my head how because obviously we've seen it used in, like, the Arrowverse on how, like, it could resurrect people. They wouldn't be immortal, but it'd resurrect them, and obviously that came with its complications. And even they used it in Titans to bring back Jason, made him Red Hood, but also Dick Grayson, so... But like I said, it doesn't make you immortal. It doesn't make you invulnerable where you can, like, snap, like, come back like that. At least it shouldn't. Once again, I'm a little iffy on the details about... Once again, maybe you have to bathe in it, like, stay in the Lazarus Pit for a very, very long time until it completely gets absorbed for you to be a race/Ra's al Ghul situation. But Maybe his circumstances are different in comparison with the Lazarus Pit. I don't remember the ins and outs of it, because the last time we dealt with Raish fully was like, I don't remember if that was like after that. Yeah, that had to be afterwards, because I know that was like a season 3/season 4 story in Gotham, I believe. But like, because he could still be killed, because it's longevity, like I said, not indestructibility, so it might be something else. But speaking of Gotham, didn't the Court of Owls have a tie to the League of Shadows? I had to pause because it kind of messes me up, because they are the League of Assassins and Shadows. It's the same group, just different names. Gotham used League of Shadows, Arrow used League of Assassins, so that's what kind of screws me up. But I'm like, didn't the Court of Owls stuff tie into the Ra's al Ghul stuff, the League of Shadows stuff in Gotham? I just can't remember off the top of my head. I feel like it did, so there might be a correlation there, like that. That's what I'm thinking, which is so interesting that we're diving into the more potentially the more supernatural side of the Batman and Gotham lore, you know. So I think that's kind of interesting. You also had Turner turning to the one person he believed that he could still turn to, and that's Crescenda, which is kind of sad because we've known for a while now that she's a part of all this, and Turner only now finds out this episode, especially because he turned to her because he thought, like, right, will she, I have to take this gamble. Who knows if she'll call the cops on me? But when he went to her, she's like, no, I believe you. I trust you. I never doubted you for a moment. And for him, it's like that meant a lot because she is the only family, just like how Alfred wasn't just a butler for Bruce. That was another, pseudo dad for him. Crescenda was kind of like Cressida was kind of I keep butchering the name. Was it Crescenda? I believe I keep butchering the name. Was like a pseudo mom to him. And now it's like, wait, you've been lying to me. You were like, who knows when the Court of Owls tapped her? Like from the very beginning, for as long as she's been in his life and a part of Bruce's life, it had to be a thing of no, like I've been like, this was always going to be the plan. This was always going to be the end result. Or did they eventually tap her because of her position? Who knows? But it turns out that she was poisoning Bruce little by little, so that's why he ended up getting killed by the Talon, because he was kind of weakened by it, and his movements were sluggish. That's why he got caught off guard and was so sadly easily killed. So she's like, I didn't directly have your dad murdered, but I played my role in it. And it's like, I care about you, and that this isn't I didn't ever mean to hurt you, but it's like, yeah, maybe she never thought it was going to come down to that she'd ever have to be in a situation where she'd have to kill Bruce. She never realized, or be responsible for Bruce's death. She never thought that was what was going to be called upon her when it came to all of this. Because she's not like an official member of the court, she just works for them, because I was surprised when they just showed up at the place. I also love, let's not forget, they're not special, like, oh, they're like these top class, like, warriors or nothing. It's like, no, they're just high class rich people, because the moment stuff started popping off with the Talon and Turner was shooting at him, like, they ran away, like, ducking, like, kind of scared, because, once again, they're just rich and powerful people, but they're not anything, like, other than they're being rich and powerful, like, they're nothing special, they're just regular humans, they just have a lot of money and influence. But like I said, I thought it was so interesting that they wanted to have Turner join their group. All he had to do was sell out everyone, all the others, like, Delia, Cullen, and Harper, but he refused to, because when the person he's supposed to trust most in this world, the last family he had in this world, when they end up betraying you, all you can do is turn to the people who are your unlikely allies. And Stephanie reminded him that, right, you might not have, like, you lost the last bit of your family, but you still got me, and you got those 3 weirdos downstairs as well. With these new developments and discoveries about who the Talon actually is, which still begs the question, well, how do you stop him if he's just going to get back up if he's over 100 years old, 100 or so years old, and he can just get back up like nothing more to it? Then how do you stop? I mean, I guess the only thing you could do is go for full-blown decapitation. But how do you deal with that? because they ended up pulling fingerprints off the music box that Delia ended up stealing from the Talon's daughter, and they ended up running the fingerprint and ultimately ended up finding out that it's the Butcher of Gotham is who the Talon really is. We'll ultimately have to wait to see where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.